Following Aaron's epic run in God of Thunder and his depowering of Thor, the run gets a bit more segmented before diving into the next big series, The Mighty Thor. Today it's time to take a look at the entire run of the Goddess of Thunder as she tries her best to prevent the War of the Realms. As a brief recap of the last series, the Dark Elf Malekith has returned with massive plans to take over the Ten Realms. The CEO of the Roxxon Energy Corporation and part-time Minotaur Dario Agger is also expanding into the Ten Realms, and the secret of the Tenth Realm, Heaven of the Angels, is out, as well as Thor's sister Angela. Odin has also returned to Asgard, and a secret whisper has made Thor unworthy of Mjolnir. Our first series is another volume of Thor, illustrated by Russell Dauterman. The first issue sees Thor attempt to lift Mjolnir, but to no avail. In fact, nobody can lift it, not even the very angry Odin, who is being a dictator already, despite having just returned. Despite having no hammer, that doesn't stop Thor from heading to Earth to stop the Frost Giants, who are invading a Roxxon research station looking for something of value. Unfortunately for Thor, Malekith is also there and he amputates Thor's arm and leaves him for dead. However, a mysterious female has lifted Mjolnir and become the Goddess of Thunder, having gained the powers of Thor. She goes after the Frost Giants and kicks their butts, but finds his Guardians and Avengers frozen in ice. She pursues the Frost Giants to Roxxon Sky Island, where they are invading with Malekith to find the skull of Laufey, the deceased Frost Giant king. Things are going well for the Goddess of Thunder until she loses Mjolnir in an impenetrable room. The Goddess of Thunder is forced to fight the Frost Giants on her own while Malekith fights Dario Agger for the skull of Laufey, and the Goddess of Thunder is able to get Mjolnir back and stop the Frost Giants just in time for a very angry Thor to arrive, complete with a sick metal arm. Thor fights the Goddess of Thunder in an attempt to reclaim Mjolnir, and she refuses to tell him who she is, which is a stupid move in hindsight as it would have prevented a lot of trouble. As it stands, she is able to calm Thor down enough to impress him with her Mjolnir skills, as she is able to get Mjolnir to fly around on its own. Thor grants her the title of Thor, which she reluctantly accepts, and Malekith leaves before they can harm him any more. Once the Thors leave, Malekith returns and offers Agger the Nine Realms in exchange for the skull, which Agger accepts, making him and Malekith business partners. 5 sees Odin appoint his brother Kol, the god of fear, as his minister of justice, and the newly dubbed Odinson sets out to find the identity of the new Thor, starting with Freya and Lady Sif, although he doubts both. Meanwhile, the new Thor swears to Freya to do her best to honor the legacy of Thor. We then finally check in on Jane Foster, who is still refusing magical help for her cancer because plot, even though the chemotherapy doesn't seem to be helping her on Asgardia. We also check in on Ross Solomon, who has been out doing her best to bring down Roxxon. Odinson continues his search for the identity of Thor and decides that it is probably Roz, which becomes even more likely when Thor attacks the Roxxon base that Roz was at. She is then interrupted by the invincible destroyer of Asgard, controlled by Kol and sent by Odin to retrieve Mjolnir. The battle does not go well, with Thor outmatched by the destroyer's might. Fortunately, Thor and Freya show up with an army of female superheroes, everyone on Odinson's list, to help fight the destroyer. They are able to get the upper hand, but still have trouble winning. Freya manages to convince Odin that he doesn't want his legacy to be death and destruction, so the destroyer flies away. Roz then shows up, astounding Odinson. Thor returns to Asgardia, revealing to the audience that she is actually Jane Foster, which was a pretty big reveal at the time. In the background of all this, Agger and Malekith make good on their partnership by invading Alfheim, the realm of the Light Elves, and we learn that Agger got his Minotaur powers from an old god after his parents died. The last part of this little series is the Thor Annual, which contains 3 quick stories about the various Thors. The first one sees King Thor's granddaughters from the future make animals to repopulate Earth for Thor as a birthday gift, and he uses the last of the magic clay to create a pair of humans named Jane and Steve. The second one sees the Warriors 3 send our new Goddess of Thunder on some quest to prove her worthiness, and they all bond and have a good time. The last one sees young Thor beat Mephisto, aka Marvel Satan, in a drinking game. They just get less and less serious as they go. Overall, 2014's Thor is a decent mystery plot about who the new Thor is, and again makes Odinson question what it means to be worthy. We also get to see how much of a jerk Odin is and move the overarching plot of Malekith's plans forward. It's a nice quick little series before the big event. And by before, I mean we have one more pit stop first, as Marvel mandated that the multiverse end in 2015's Secret Wars, which merged all the universes together into a singular universe called Battleworld. Aaron got to write a series, called Thors, about the Thor Corps, a group of police made up of Thors that will tie into the main plot later, so let's zoom through it. The series stars the Thor from Marvel's Ultimate Universe as he investigates a series of murders, with all of the victims being Jane Foster. Unfortunately, his partner, Beta Ray Bill, is seemingly murdered by his informant, Loki. Ultimate Thor meets the unworthy Thor, who knows something about the case, then captures Loki. Loki reveals that there is something that the Thor Corps don't know, and that he didn't murder the Janes, implying that he knows about Battleworld. He gives Ultimate Thor the location of a pile of bones in Jane Foster's and Donald Blake's, Thor's original alter ego. He is then attacked by Rune Thor, the one who actually killed the Janes and Ultimate Thor's partner. Ultimate Thor is left for dead, but is saved by Unworthy Thor, and the two storm Asgardian and attack Rune Thor, who has been working with Loki to hide the secret of Battleworld. The battle is interrupted by the Goddess of Thunder, who convinces the Thors to turn against their leader and rain chaos. Battleworld is then destroyed, leading the Mjolnir of the Ultimate Thor to crash into old Asgard in the main Marvel universe after its recreation. It's a really fun miniseries that can be read with minimal knowledge of 2015 Secret Wars, although obviously works better with it. The only relevant thing to Aaron's run is the introduction of Ultimate Thor's hammer, which will come into play later in an important plotline. Next up starts Aaron's longest ongoing series, Mighty Thor, illustrated again by Russell Dauterman and again starring Jane Foster as Thor. The first issue serves to catch us up back with what's going on after Secret Wars, with Jane suffering cancer and her transformations into Thor canceling out the chemotherapy, but keeping the cancer, which is oddly inconvenient. Malekith then kicks off the War of the Realms by invading Alfheim and dropping light elves into Earth from space. Jane and Volstagg try to get the Congress of Worlds to help, but to no avail, and when Jane becomes Thor and tries to leave, she's attacked by Odin's Thunder Guard, although the all-seeing Heimdall is able to send her off. Thor does her best in Alfheim, while Loki is added to Malekith's Dark Council, consisting of Malekith, Laufey, Aegir, Cinder, the Queen of Muspelheim, and Thor's old enemy, the Enchantress. As a test run, Loki is sent to kill Thor. Loki and Thor fight, with Loki creating illusions of his various past looks to fight, with the female Loki taking center stage while present Loki argues with his older selves about his alignment. Thor wins just in time for Malekith to bomb Alfheim. Thor manages to stop all the bombs, but the Queen of the Light Elves decides to end the war by trying to make peace with Malekith, but she is duped by Enchantress into marrying him, ending the war by placing Malekith in charge of Alfheim. Thor then takes Loki and pops over to Asgardia, where Odin is putting Freya on trial for treason, and she keeps snapping back that Odin is the one who is betraying Asgard. Thor battles Odin while the Warriors 3, Sif, and Loki free Freya and fight against Kol and the Thunder Guard, with Freya revealing that Loki is her spy on Malekith's council. Unfortunately for her, Loki stabs her in the back, putting her in a coma and ending the battle instantly. Odin traps himself in a healing chamber with Freya and places Kol in charge of Asgard, while Loki escapes to Laufey and Thor focuses her attention on the War of the Realms. We also get our first look at Odinson, who is trapped in space somewhere. This first arc puts a focus on feminism and fathers, something of a theme in Jane's story. I'll dive more into the feminism aspect later once we're done, but parallels are definitely drawn between Odin and Laufey, who absolutely hates Loki for not acting like a frost giant and being a failed son, using trickery over brute strength. Odin is obviously such a huge jerk and is repeatedly called a tyrant, and despite claiming that he wants to capture Thor as she stole Mjolnir, he is oblivious to the fact that Odinson gave her the hammer, despite being told that by both Odinson and Freya. It's definitely not a good look for Odin, although it is obvious he cares about Freya. Issues 6 and 7 are a two-parter featuring Loki telling Aegir about a tale of young Thor, where a Viking named Bodolf grows so bold that he tries to fight Thor and is crushed, so Loki feeds him the heart of a dragon and he basically turns into the Hulk. After going on a rampage, young Thor fights and beats Bodolf, and in the present day, Loki directs Aegir to kill a similar dragon to enhance his armies. It's a solid story, but they have an odd placement and add very little for a two-parter. Issue 8 sees Jane abducted by some S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who are out to prove that she's actually Thor, although she's saved by Roz. Roz then goes off to the secret global summit where the leaders of the world's greatest corporations meet to discuss business, and everyone is mad at Aegir for not sharing the 10 realms. These include the Silver Samurai and Exterminatrix, who capture Aegir. Roz and Thor arrive too late, but head off together to stop them. As it turns out, Aegir enacted something called the Aegir Imperative, which will drop Roxxon Island into Manhattan if he's hurt, and only Aegir can shut it off. The two reluctantly head off to save Aegir, who has been taken to Roxxon Island so his vault can be stolen from him by Exterminatrix and Silver Samurai. Aegir activates his Berserker Squad, which are powered up like Bodolf from Loki's story, although they're all taken out by Thor. A big battle breaks out, and Exterminatrix shoots Thor with a bullet that starts to turn her to gold, and S.H.I.E.L.D. tries to arrest her for hiding her identity as Jane Foster as well, which is when Jane Foster shows up. Thor helps this mysterious Jane remove the bullet, and Exterminatrix and Silver Samurai are captured. Aegir is also knocked out before he can stop the Aegir Imperative. Not the Initiative, that's the Avengers thing. But either way, Thor is able to evacuate the island and yeet it into the sun after turning it to gold with the bullet. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents apologize to Jane and promise to leave her alone. That leaves Jane, Thor, and Roz together, and Jane reveals that she is actually a transformation of Mjolnir, which makes absolutely no sense but is kind of cool. Thor also reveals her identity as Jane to Roz, and Roz promises to keep it a secret before the real Jane is taken away by Mjolnir. It's certainly an interesting arc, being more Earth-based than the last one, and the Mjolnir reveal is really something. We then get to learn more about Mjolnir, as an ancient book on Omnipotent City reveals that Mjolnir is actually imbued with the God Storm, the galactic storm to end all storms, giving it its power, which is actually neat. Issues 13 and 14 are a two-parter featuring the League of the Realms from Thor, God of Thunder, this time bigger and better than ever. Along with Thor, Sif, Honeyshot, Ood the Troll, and Screwbeard, the leader are joined by Sif, Angela, Roz, the Vanir Sorcerer Bloodroot, and the giant Titania. Their mission is to head into Alfheim and rescue the Queen of the Light Elves, although they run into trouble when they find that the Queen has been replaced by a duplicate and Malekith attacks with his new henchman, Curse, the old Thorfell. Although in this case, Curse has a new identity as Waziria, the Dark Elf who took Malekith's place in Hell, although the League doesn't know that. The League is definitely outgunned, and things only get worse when Malekith lights the Alfheim capital on fire and mutilates the Queen's mouth before leaving with his shiny new black Bifrost, leaving Alfheim in ruins and all the realms in anticipation of who will be next, with the answer being all of them. Before any more realms get torched, though, we take a little break from the Goddess of Thunder to check on the Odinson and Aaron's 5-issue miniseries, The Unworthy Thor, with art by Olivier Cobiel. The first issue opens with Odinson revealing that he wakes up every day to fight a horde of prison guards before being returned to his cell. The rest of the issue functions as a flashback, with Odinson fighting some trolls on the moon before the Unseen, the new omniscient Watcher, tells Odin about a second Mjolnir. Odinson heads to Old Asgard, where he finds the hammer of the ultimate Thor. He is also met by his old friend, the mainline Beta Ray Bill, who offers Odinson his hammer, Stormbreaker. Odinson refuses, saying that he is not worthy. Old Asgard has been attacked by the Collector, an elder god who collects things. Despite the Odinsons and Beta Ray Bill's best attempts, they and Old Asgard are captured, launching Thor into a cycle of prison breaks in his attempt to reach the ultimate Mjolnir, which the Collector also wants. A third party joins the fray, consisting of Proxima, Midnight, and Black Swan of Thanos' Black Order, as well as a mysterious stranger, as Thanos wants ultimate Mjolnir for himself. Beta Ray Bill breaks Odinson and Loki's former pet Hellhound Thorway out of prison, and despite Thor temporarily trying to steal Stormbreaker in a rage, the three team up and go after ultimate Mjolnir. Odinson also reveals to Beta Ray Bill that he became unworthy when he learned that Gorr the God Butcher was right, that the universe would be better without gods. However, Beta Ray Bill assures him that Odinson just has to work to prove Gorr wrong. Together, Odinson, Beta Ray Bill, and Thori manage to fight through the Collector and the Black Order, enabling Odinson to reach the ultimate Mjolnir and nearly grab it. However, Odinson feels that it is not his Mjolnir and decides to leave it be, but not before freeing Old Asgard from the Collector and populating it with the rest of the Collector's collection. Meanwhile, the Black Order and the Stranger return to Thanos, where the Stranger kills the Black Order before revealing herself to be Hela, the Norse goddess of death and former ruler of Hell. She makes a pact with Thanos to reclaim her throne, as Ultimate Mjolnir calls out to another soldier. This mini-series is really solid, with great art and a good story. The reveal about why Odinson became unworthy is also cool, tying Aaron's run back to the beginning with something that had been teased since the first arc. It's also cool that Beta Ray Bill gets to show up again, and Thor is a fun addition to the cast. We then return to Mighty Thor with issue 15, the start of the Asgard Shi'ar War. After Cole gives Jane a week to heal herself of cancer or retire from the Congress of Worlds due to her missing too many meetings, Asgard is attacked by the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, primarily their lead Gladiator. Thor shows up to break up the fight, which is when Gladiator grabs her and teleports away. As it turns out, Thor has been summoned by the Shi'ar Guards, who challenge her to a challenge of the gods, a game where they take turns causing as much destruction as possible to see who is the better god. Thor doesn't want to play, and just spends most of the rounds cleaning up the mess made by the Shi'ar gods to ensure nobody is hurt, earning her a few points and angering the Shi'ar gods. Meanwhile, Sif convinces Cole to go to war with the Shi'ar as revenge for attacking Asgard, both to rescue Thor and to prove that Cole, the god of fear, is not a coward. In a flashback, we learn that Loki tricked the Shi'ar gods into challenging Thor by making them think that she thought them useless in order to keep Thor out of Malekith's way. In the present, the games rage on and Thor pretty much loses, causing her to try and engage in ritual combat with the Shi'ar gods. They don't take kindly to her refusal to play and activate the judgment of the gods, which terrifies the scorekeeper. Thor then gets help from the Asgardians, and they team up to fight the Shi'ar gods. Part 4 opens on Earth, with X-Men prodigy Quentin Quire chilling on an island when Thor and Gladiator's kid come get his help to stop the Phoenix. We then cut back to a few hours earlier, where the Asgardians are kicking the butt of the Shi'ar gods. So they kiss and summon the all-powerful Phoenix Force, fire and life incarnate, bringer of destruction. Thor tries to stop it from destroying stuff, but fails miserably, which is what leads her to get Quentin. Thor and Quentin try to slow down the Phoenix Force, with Quentin attempting to merge with it as he will in the future, as predicted in a recent X-Men story, one that was also written by Aaron. The Phoenix Force talks to Jane for a bit before Odinson shows up and Quentin merges with it. Gladiator denounces the Shi'ar gods, and they are arrested in the Hall of Omnipotence, with Quentin becoming the new Shi'ar god. With everything over and done with, Jane steps down from the Congress of Worlds, installing Roz as her replacement, much to Cole's anger. Jane then prepares to tell Odinson about her secret as Thor, as the judgment of the gods, the indestructible Mangog, hurtles towards Asgard. The Asgard-Shi'ar War is one of the weaker arcs so far, but it works to bring in the Mangog and plays into Aaron's theme of what it takes to be a god, as the Shi'ar gods are horrible gods and horrible people who care nothing for their subjects, which is why they are denounced and imprisoned at the end of the story. On the other hand, Thor continues to prove herself to be the ideal god, doing everything in her power to save everyone, as all gods should. The next arc tells the tale of the War Thor, from issues 20 to 23. It all starts at the Light Elf refugee camps in Nidavellir, which is being visited by Roz and Volstagg. Volstagg starts giving food to the starving children when the camps are firebombed by the invading fire demons of Muspelheim. They obliterate the camps, killing nearly everyone in them. Volstagg tries to escape with the hungry children, but watches them burn before his eyes, surviving only due to the fire demon blood he was drenched in. Volstagg is then taken back to Asgardia by Roz, where he basically suffers PTSD until he was called to Old Asgard to pick up Ultimate Mjolnir and become the War Thor, which he used to destroy all the invading fire demons, ravaging Nidavellir in the process. Meanwhile, Odinson does not take Jane's news of her being Thor well, but rushes her to the healers when she starts collapsing due to her cancer. On the vestiges of her death as Jane Foster, Jane becomes Thor once more, as her Thor body is free of cancer and she can use it to fight in the war. The war has been taken to Muspelheim by the War Thor, as he seeks to destroy Cinder, queen of the fire demons, for her murdering of children. The War Thor is assisted by so many Thors. The War Thor is assisted by Thor, but the War Thor starts to destroy all of Muspelheim, with the comic going out of its way to show Thor, the Thor, Jane, saving the baby fire demons that are being caught up in the War Thor's, Volstagg's, rampage. Fueled by the rage of the dead Battleworld inside Ultimate Mjolnir, the War Thor doesn't even consider the fire demons to have lives and be worthy of saving, causing Thor to take them to the Yawning Void so Muspelheim is not destroyed in their battle. The two Thors clash and are fairly even until Thor slams the War Thor into Svartalheim and steals his hammer. She tries to throw it away, but the rage in both Ultimate Mjolnir and the War Thor draws it immediately back. Roz and Odinson arrive as backup, Odinson taking Thor's place in the fight, while Roz reveals that the War Thor is Volstagg, which she realized back in Muspelheim. Thor reverts back into Jane, as only the occupied War Thor doesn't know her secret, and she manages to talk the War Thor back into Volstagg as Jane by reminding him that he's a kind, caring, nurturing person at heart. While Jane nurses Volstagg's depression, Odin sends the Ultimate Mjolnir back to Old Asgard. This arc is my personal favorite from Jane's time as the Goddess of Thunder, with the standout feature being the focus on the impact of war and what it can do to a person, blinding them with rage and making them want to destroy indiscriminately. I also love how it shows the wanton destruction on both sides, with both Light Elf and Fire Demon children being scared and murdered. It's a really impactful arc that manages to work in the strong message without sacrificing the inherent magic in a story about gods, magic hammers, and fire demons. Around this time, Marvel published a series of Generations one-shots showing two heroes with the same name teaming up, which is how we get Generations, the Unworthy Thor and the Mighty Thor, which fits nicely here for Jane. In reality, it primarily follows young Thor as he battles the classic X-Men villain Apocalypse in ancient Egypt, joined by a time-traveling goddess of thunder. The two fight off Apocalypse, and Thor's camaraderie with his Viking fellows reminds Jane of what makes Thor special, his humanity. We then launch into our last arc, titled Death of the Mighty Thor, which uses the legacy numbering of Thor's comic, meaning it starts at issue 700. Don't worry about it. This double-sized issue features a bunch of small stories featuring characters like Loki, the Frog, Thor, and Volstagg, but the meat of the issue is taken up by two threads. That of Thor battling a raging She-Hulk, mostly a setup for the upcoming Avengers series by Aaron, and Odinson working with the fate-weaving Norns to save them from Malekith's forces. He does his best, but the lead Norn, Karnilla, is killed in battle, warning Odinson of Jane Foster's upcoming death. The issue ends with Ultimate Mjolnir summoning Volstagg and turning him into the War Thor. This is just in time for Old Asgard to be attacked by the Mangog, Judgment of the Gods. The two spend the issue having an intensely epic and brutal battle, with the Mangog brutalizing the War Thor before crushing Ultimate Mjolnir to bits, reverting War Thor back to Volstagg. Malekith then arrives and directs the Mangog to Asgardia before dropping Volstagg into space. Issue 702 sees Thor recruit the gods of Olympus to help fight in the War of the Realms through Old Avengers ally Hercules, before Odinson reprimands her for killing herself with Mjolnir and not curing her cancer. He explains that the world needs Jane Foster and he doesn't want her to kill herself. Thor then decides that she has to do something as Jane, and goes up to Odin's chamber to start yelling at him for being a coward, nearly starting an insurrection. Odin exits his chamber for the first time since Freya was stabbed and threatens to kill Jane for disturbing him, before a weakly Freya walks out and says that Jane is right. Before anything can be done, however, Jane collapses as the Mangog arrives at Asgardia's doorstep. Jane is taken to a hospital where she is watched by Odinson, Ross, Doctor Strange, and the Falcon, her ex-boyfriend from the Avengers. They tell Jane that she needs to heal, and that if she becomes Thor again, the transformation back into Jane will kill her. Mjolnir shows up to take her to the Mangog, but she rejects it, telling the others that they have to make sure they win the War of the Realms. This is contrasted with the Mangog destroying Asgard, mutilating Heimdall's eyes, crushing the Destroyer, and beating Odin to a pulp. Odinson arrives in time to lend a hand, but he and Odin are clearly outmatched. The two of them spend the next issue holding off the Mangog while Jane walks around the hospital talking to her fellow patients. Meanwhile, the Mangog decides to crash Asgardia into the sun, assuming all the gods will die with it. Loki also pops in to tell Freya that he had to stab her to keep her alive, as Malekith would have killed her otherwise, but Freya is still rightfully pissed at him for it. On Earth, Jane overhears Ross on the phone with the space crew Alpha Flight and learns of Asgardia's plight, leading her to take up Mjolnir and head to Asgardia to stop the Mangog. Odinson is not happy she's there, but Thor convinces all the Asgardians to evacuate while she finishes the fight. Issue 705 is a smackdown battle against the Mangog, contrasted against scenes from Jane's youth where she learns issues of her family's death and the inability of the gods to save them. The Mangog crushes Thor and declares that he can sense she hates the gods, and asks her why she fights for them. Thor declares that she fights for love, and despite the gods doing bad things sometimes, they have also done enough good to be worth saving. With Odinson's help, Thor ties the Mangog up in 9 unbreakable chains and has Mjolnir fling them into the sun, destroying Mangog and Mjolnir. With Mjolnir gone, Thor transforms back into Jane, dying in Odinson's arms. In the conclusion of Mighty Thor, issue 706, Jane finds herself at the gates of Valhalla, where she's confronted by Odin, the ruler of Valhalla. After telling her that she's been a real pain, he admits that she sacrificed herself to save all the gods and died a hero, and welcomes her into Valhalla. However, Jane is reluctant to go, feeling that she has something left to do, and on the moon, Odinson tries to harness the power of the Godstorm to revive Jane, as it was released when Mjolnir was destroyed. However, it won't work and is killing Odinson, but Odin decides to give him a hand and they revive Jane, dissipating the Godstorm in the process. The last few pages work as an epilogue, set a while later, with the Asgardians rebuilding old Asgard and Jane putting all her attention to chemotherapy. She bestows her title of Thor back onto the Odinson, telling him that the world always needs a Thor. So Thor Odinson decides to make his own hammer, leaving Jane content with the future of the realms. A really good arc to close out Jane's time as the Goddess of Thunder. We're not done though, as there's one more one-shot titled Mighty Thor at the Gates of Valhalla. The first half sees the Girls of Thunder from King Thor's time travel through time with time gems until they meet Jane, saying that she's an inspiration to them, and they grant Jane one last flight. The other half is devoted to Malekith, who tells the Dark Elves to feast on their unworthy neighbors if they are hungry, then goes to delight in the War of the Realms, even bringing the Angels of Heaven into his dark council. Jane's time as Thor is a solid chapter in Jason Aaron's ongoing story, with Russell Dauterman's art bringing things to life beautifully. While I can't say that I like this era more than God of Thunder, due to weaker individual arcs, I still think there are some standout ones, notably the War Thor Exterminatrix and Death of the Mighty Thor arcs, which are all on par with the God of Thunder ones. This era also continues to explore what it means to be worthy, with Jane exemplifying all of those qualities as Mjolnir's chosen one, namely compassion and a willingness to sacrifice oneself for their own beliefs, building on the theme set up in God of Thunder. This stuff is highlighted with the haughtiness of the Shi'ar gods, the unbridled destruction of the War Thor, and the self-righteousness of Odin. Speaking of Odin, this era has a strong feminist swing to it, although not necessarily in a bad way. This pops out mostly in characters either remarking how capable Jane's Thor is, or remarking that a woman can never be Thor before being shown up by Jane. It's also very prominent in Odin, who is a terrible dictator with no respect for anyone but himself, and especially cannot stand to hear the opinions of Freya or the new Thor, presenting him as a despotic patriarch while Freya is a kind, compassionate, good ruling matriarch. While it can occasionally get a bit irritating, it works for the characters and it doesn't pop up where it doesn't need to. Oddly enough, none of the series' big bads, Malekith, Aggr, or the Mangog, are related to feminism at all, with Malekith and Aggr just being egomaniacs and the Mangog being a force of destruction tied back to worthiness. Plus, characters like Odinson, Heimdall, and Volstagg are all shown to be good and competent, and Loki is very complex. So while the feminism is present, it very rarely takes control of the series, and mostly informs it in the background while letting the theme of worthiness take center stage, which is a really well done way to handle such a controversial topic. It is present but not rude or distracting, with the goal of empowering women and not depowering men, the tyrannical Odin notwithstanding. It's a really quality follow-up to the God of Thunder that also stands nicely on its own. Next time, we follow Thor Odinson into the War of the Realms. See you then.